I used to think there were things in life that were incomprehensible without a common language, like love, like intimacy, or the feeling of acceptance in a foreign place. But that was before I sat in a small kitchen in rural Mexico with a woman whose words I didn't understand, and helped her wrap hot cakes in green leaves I'd never touched in my life. We arrived in Oaxaca after 4 days in the RV. The old thing still ran, though every time we went uphill, the engine groaned like it was complaining to the heavens. Walt said it sounded like his snoring in the middle of the night. Loud, annoying, but at least regular. I laughed, even though my back was aching and my stomach was so hungry that the smell of anything hot brought tears to my eyes. We didn't stop at a hotel. In fact, where we were headed, there weren't any hotels. Just a few rusty tin roofs, a red dirt yard, and a kitchen with peeling, steaming tiles. The woman appeared from inside. Her hair was tied back, her hands were full of white flour, her eyes were smiling and also examining who we were. But for just a split second, she held out her hand, inviting me in without a word, just a look and a gesture. Walt was fiddling with the blinking lights in the RV, so he said, "You go experience the culture. I'll stay and fight the moldy electrical system." So I walked into the kitchen. The small room, the smell of wood smoke and corn flour mixed together, reminded me of the kitchen of my childhood, where my mother used to bake bread every morning, where an old handkerchief was always placed by the stove as a matter of habit. The woman handed me a soft ball of dough, a corn leaf, and a small wooden spoon. She said nothing, just demonstrated with her practiced hands. Within seconds, the first tamale appeared, wrapped and carefully wrapped as if it were a gift rather than a dish. I looked, then followed. The leaf tore. The flour fell. Everything was distorted. I looked at her, embarrassed. She smiled. Not a mocking smile, but a knowing smile, like she had taught someone far more clumsy than I. Then she handed me another leaf. I tried again. This time, it was a little better. We said nothing for almost an hour. There was only the sound of the stove, the sound of flour falling, and her occasional humming of a tune in Spanish that I didn't understand but found soothing. When the pancakes were piled high in a large tray, she patted her chest and said, "Luz." I knew that was her name. I pointed to myself. "Martha." She nodded, then hugged me. For the first time in my life, I was hugged by someone I knew nothing about except for her name, and I realized language is not a condition for connection. When I got back to the car, Walt had finished installing the lights. He looked up at me and said, "You look like you've been to a cooking class." I just laughed. That night, we were invited to stay. Luz spread out a mat on the porch. Dinner consisted of tamales, juice, and a few neighbors who came to add to the meal. No one spoke English. No one said much. But everyone laughed, everyone nodded, and everyone ate as if we had been part of the family meal for ages. A little girl climbed onto my lap and offered me her first piece of the cake she had wrapped herself. I ate it, pretending to be surprised, and she giggled and hid behind her mother's skirt. When everyone went to bed, Luz took a small framed photo from the house. An old one. It showed a man in military uniform. She showed it to me, then pointed to the sky. I didn't need anyone to translate. I put my hand on hers. She looked at me, her eyes wet. Like me, she must have waited for someone to come home. Like me, she must have lost someone. That night, I lay next to Walt, holding his hand, and I said, "You know, there are people you meet once, but they make you feel like you're right where you should be." He just said, and fell asleep. He didn't need to say much, but I think he understood. The next morning, as we were leaving, Luz handed me a small handkerchief embroidered with flowers. I knew she'd embroidered it the night before, right after I'd gone to bed. I didn't know what to do but hug her tight, and for the first time, I said the only word I thought she'd understand. Gracias. And it occurred to me, maybe you don't have to travel far to see the world. You just have to sit in a stranger's kitchen, make something clumsy, and listen with all your heart. In my video letter that day, I told those listening, if you're ever afraid of where to start with flour, a leaf, and a friend who doesn't speak your language. Because you'll be surprised at what you get in return. And because, really, the world is a lot kinder than we think. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Luz was already in the yard, her hands quickly watering the vegetables, carrying water, and gathering some dry branches. I stood still and watched for a long time, not understanding why my heart felt so calm. Perhaps it was because it had been a long time since I had seen an old woman working and humming so lightly. She didn't sing for anyone, nor for anyone. She was just living so simply, so fully. When she saw me, she didn't say anything, just held up a sprig of coriander and gestured like today's a special dish, which made me laugh like a child promised cake. That whole morning, I didn't record a video, didn't write a diary, and didn't make any plans. I just stood by her side, learning how to wash the leaves, tear the chilies, and heat the cake over the fire so that the outer layer was just charred enough while the inside was still soft and fragrant. She taught me with her hands, her eyes, her hum when she was not satisfied, and her pursed lips when I did something right. There was no language between us, but there was a lot of understanding. At noon, when the meal was over, I saw another group of women coming. They were carrying bundles of vegetables, baskets of bread and fruit. It turned out to be a women's group meeting day in the village. They gathered once a week, not for meetings or anything big, just to cook together and tell each other stories. And today, I was part of it. A young woman named Camilla, who knew a little English, approached me and started talking. She said, "They say you smile like the people in the embroidery. Kind and genuine." I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled and gently touched the scarf Luz had given me the night before. All afternoon, I sat listening to stories in Spanish that I didn't understand, but my eyes still moistened when an old woman mentioned her dead mother. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the emotions. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the way her hands shook as she spoke, the way everyone fell silent for a long time afterward, and then someone else quietly stood up to pour her tea. And I thought, maybe kindness is like the aroma of the tamales this morning. You don't need anyone to teach you to recognize it. In the afternoon, when everyone had left, Luz took me to the back of the house. She pointed to a large cactus as tall as a person and drew a circle in the ground with her hand. I didn't understand. She was silent, went into the house and brought out an old photo. In the photo, there was a girl, long hair, wearing a brocade dress, holding her pregnant belly. She pointed to the girl's belly and then pointed to the sky. I understood. The baby didn't make it to birth. I put my hand on hers, squeezed it gently. She didn't cry, but I felt something very deep, very quiet in this woman's heart. I didn't ask any more questions. We just stood there in the middle of the quiet courtyard, with the sunset tinting the cobblestones and the cactus leaves breathing softly. That evening, I wrote a sentence in my notebook that I didn't even know I'd written. Today, I'm not living for anyone. I'm just being true to myself. Walt saw it, but he didn't ask. He just put his hand lightly on my shoulder and said, "Shall we continue tomorrow?" I nodded, then whispered, "But tonight, I want to sit on the porch a little longer." And so I sat, alone, no phone calls, no cars, just the sound of crickets, the sound of Luz's stove turned off, and an old wooden chair that she placed next to me, as if to say, "If you have something to say, sit down." And I sat like that for a long time, until the dew fell on my hair, until I felt like I was truly in Mexico, not just with my feet, but with my heart. I thought I had ended the story in that little kitchen, where the smell of smoke and cornmeal had woven into a tender memory in my heart. But Mexico did not let me go yet. It held me, not with words, but with small details that young people often do not notice. A wooden door opened with an old radio playing a warm, smoky bolero, an old man pushing a colorful fruit cart, or a child hugging a small dog, as if it were the only thing that did not change in this world. I found myself silent in the midst of these very ordinary things, but imbued with something like regret. Not exactly sadness, not pain, just a feeling as light as a drizzle, the kind that makes people stop, but do not know why. After saying goodbye to Luz, Walt and I decided to walk around the town's market. It was not crowded, but lively. The vendors didn't shout loudly. They just sat there, waiting, as if everyone who came had been chosen in advance. We passed a small booth where an old man was displaying small oil paintings, rough wooden frames, warm colors, awkward strokes, but full of emotion. One painting made me stop. It was a woman cooking, her back turned, but her hair was detailed, neatly tied up, a spatula in her right hand, a corn leaf in her left. I was speechless. It was exactly like Luz's pose last night. I asked the old man, "Who painted this?" He smiled gently. "My wife," before she left. Walt touched my back gently. Needless to say, I knew he felt the same way, as if this place was whispering to us something we only understand when we reach a certain age, when our hearts are no longer hasty but softer than ever. The old man handed me a small card and said, "If you like it, take it home. You remind me of her." I took the painting, not to own it, but to carry a piece of Mexico, not the land, but the people. On the way back to the car, I saw an old bicycle parked under a tree. There was a wicker basket tied to the back seat, and inside were several children's books with worn edges. A little girl was sitting next to it, holding a book half open. I glanced at it and realized it was a Spanish translation of The Little Prince. I pointed to the book, smiled, and then to my heart. The girl nodded as if she understood. Perhaps the world that I had thought was so vast was not as vast as the distance between hearts that no longer believed in goodness. And if we can still recognize a familiar book in a strange land, and can still smile at someone who does not speak the same language, then it means we are still living right. When I got back to my car, I opened the picture again. I stared at the woman's figure for a long time. Then I took a pen and wrote on the back a small line. "For the meals never cooked, for the hugs never given, and for all the people who waited for someone to come back to the table." Walt saw what I was writing and asked, "What are you writing?" I replied, "I'm writing something I won't forget." We didn't videotape that afternoon, but I recorded my voice just to preserve the sound of myself as I truly listened to life. I said into the camera, "Mexico is not a stopover. It's a reminder of not missing out on the simple things, of the people who left, and of a certain dish once in our lives we promised to cook together. If you're reading this, and there's someone you promised to travel with, or do something small, or just eat the same old thing, don't wait. Write them a letter, call, or if it's too late, cook that meal for yourself. And who knows? We'll cook it again someday in a faraway land and dedicate it to you, the one who once had an unfulfilled promise.